I was born a Republican in a political family in Wyoming, which is a one-party state. I'm a libertarian. I actually think for a long time there was a lot more room in some kind of party system for libertarians in the Republican Party than there's ever been in the extremely well-intentioned but highly authoritarian Democratic Party in the United States. And for a long time, I was a perfectly enthusiastic Republican because I thought what Republicanism was fiscal restraint, limited government, individual liberties, a deep horror of foreign military adventures, antitrust, a whole bunch of things that, Goldwater believed. And then suddenly my party got yanked away by, in large part by a guy who I was one of his campaign managers. For my sins, Dick Cheney, who turned out to be like, somebody who made Cardinal Richelieu look like a good start. No, he's about as bad a cat as there is. And I'm sorry I did that, and I'm sorry I had anything to do with it. And the Patriot Act was, EFF has been systematically, methodically taking the Patriot Act in its bits and pieces to court ever since it was passed. And there's nothing Republican about that. There's something fascist about the Patriot Act, but even in their darkest days, Republicans are not quite yet fascist. I am not currently affiliated with any major party.
Okay, I'm gonna have to stop you here with one last question, and I'm gonna give it to the lady in the bar. She hasn't spoken before. Hi, det är en vill.
I'm usually in the bar, so. First of all, Jan, when you sort of criticize the Conservative Party for not taking in the new media, it's kind of like kicking a blind beggar in a wheelchair. So thank you very much for that. The other thing is I'm just curious that this is kind of a language thing because Norway is a very small linguistic country. So I think the thing with authors and proprietary rights here is kind of like in the U.S. you have an audience that are millions. Here we are 4 million people, which makes it pretty difficult to live off your the rights that you do have. And there's a difference. Do you think that there's any time that you can claim rights to the work you have that makes sense that you can claim rights and get paid for it, or is it all free? Because I think there is a difference between when you have millions of people sharing your material and when you just have a very few limited kind of linguistic area like you have in Norway.
Could I just try to get one thing very straight? I make most of my living with my mind in various different ways. There was a period when I was a cattle rancher and I made it by crawling around, in snow under a large dripping machine. But since then, I've made my living with my mind pretty much. I like getting paid for what I do, but I don't necessarily think that the model I want to choose for getting paid for what I do is exactly the same kind of control that I would exert over my car or my real estate, because I think it's fundamentally different. What goes on between me and whoever is interested in what I do with my mind is a relationship. It's a verb. It's not a noun. It's not property. And it's not that big a leap to realize that we can reevaluate this stuff. I know we painted ourselves into a bad corner with many, many, many years in which we created this huge hairball of copyright, which just got dumber and dumber as it went along, and fortunately I think it's about to just simply collapse because it can't do it anymore, and other things are coming along that will supplant it. I see now that software, which you used to have to buy and somebody claimed to own, is now increasingly a service online, Google Docs and that kind of thing. I think it's, and I always felt like what the Grateful Dead did was a service and not sales of things. that was almost all of our money came from performing. That was a service. I mean, just think about things as a service rather than in some mercantile model. It's not that hard. I think people can get perfectly well paid for what they do. They often get paid in other ways. I mean, something else happens that gets them paid. I mean, I wrote some stuff back in the early 90s that, you know, I'm still dining out on some of that stuff. I should get a little more creative now, but, you know, I've been given reasonably good lecture fees from corporations and academic institutions all over the country for the last 15 years because I wrote one rather short piece. I mean, you know, if I'd copyrighted it and looked for royalties from it, it could never possibly exceeded all those speaker fees, not in a New York nanosecond.
All right, let's do a round of comments, final comments in the panel, and once again, I apologize for those of you who didn't get a chance to follow up, but hopefully after this session, you can talk to the panelists on an individual basis, and then feel free to hang out here and mingle afterwards, and the word is yours. Jarle, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll make it short. There is no model for all. Everybody has to choose what they want.
So preoccupied with how things used to be, how things, as Jan said earlier today, which I was very amused by, this is not how it's meant to be. And the whole thing about the internet is actually it provides changes, huge changes, and we need to take advantage of them and move forward. But in that respect, we also need to protect the core values of the net that makes those changes possible. And please be awake. This fall is going to be an election, and check out which parties are in favour of the internet as a free and open part of our society.
Jan Omdal.
Sorry for kicking the blind guy in the wheelchair or whatever. Blind beggar, that was. Okay. I'll end up with entering into the whole music debate after all then by saying that I don't agree with Jarle that it's about the artist. Some of my best friends are artists, and I'm a music lover, a music buyer, a record collector, all that, and I want music to continue. I want artists to thrive. I want the artists that are really good to make a good living. I'm an author. I'm a member of a union of authors. My mother is a translator. I grew up in a tradition of people who live off creative intellectual work. But as I said a couple of times before tonight, I think we need to understand that it's not about the artist or the author, it's about society. Number one is to construct the right kind of society with the right kinds of principles, addressing all the fundamental principle rules of a good democratic, open, free society. And that needs to be taken care of before. And if that means that we have to deconstruct and rethink everything about what we used to call copyright and how artists and other creative people get paid, then well, then we have to do that. And saying this does not mean that you're against people getting paid for their creative work. It just means that you, as I think I've done over the years, realize that this road is not a road that we can go